Welcome back to my continued top 100 board games of all time. We are going to be covering numbers 71 through 80 in this list, and despite the fact that, although you can't quite see it, right beneath the camera view is a setup game of a solo game of On Mars, which is among my heaviest games. And we're going to be talking about, one heavy game out of this list of 10. I don't know why all the light games landed in this range. It's just sort of how it shook out. So let's get to the list. Coming in at number 80 is Lahav. Lahav is new to my list. Its weight is about a 7 out of 10. It plays 1 to 5 players, although I'm not sure I would want to play it at more than 3. Lahav is a Uwe Rosenberg game, and you might see another couple of his games up higher on the list eventually. It is a game that I've played solo and at 2 players, and it did take quite long considering the fact that we intentionally chose the shorter version of the game. I could have debuted this at higher had it just been after my solo play, which I was quite enchanted with the game after. I still like it quite a bit, but I found that I didn't know how to get out of debt purgatory in this game. It just seemed like every round I would just rack up more debt because my debt would compound in more debt, which compounded in more debt, and there wasn't really a way for me to beat it back. And there weren't plays that I could make that would do enough that it would beat back the debt and also take care of the significant feed your people element at the same time. I think some of that could be explained with just not having a clear grasp on how to play it. It also played very differently at solo versus 2 players, because in solo you could very much map out exactly ahead of time what you were going to do in order to meet the requirements of how much you had to feed your people. I say feed your people, that's more of an Agricola thing. It's more like just a standard amount of feeding that one has to do regardless of how many properties one owns. It's sort of a worker placement game, but it's more of resource management and action selection. Certain things will convert into other resources, and some buildings will be available and others will not. Some have to be built before they can be used. Other ones will get built, and then they can be bought so that one player owns them, and that gives them a benefit that they get from the other player for using it. It's all kind of interesting. It is familiar ground. I can see how this could have been Tom Vassel's number 1 game of all time. He said it always just rewarded you with something good that you could do every single turn. And while that is technically true, it also beats you back fairly significantly, at least at the level at which I was playing it, which was, I am presuming, not very high, that I got into the debt snowball that I did, which is ultimately why I lost. And despite the fact that I had the more impressive empire than the other person, the compounding debts just forced me to lose too much in value to compensate the properties that I did have did not compensate. I think there's an interesting game here, but I also don't feel like I can practice this game solo and then implement the lessons from there into the 2 or 3 player version of the game, because having the ability to know exactly how much is going to be piled up by a certain point, by a certain turn, is not there when the other person could take the pile that you're planning on taking later before you have a chance to take it at the level that you were planning to take it. Now, that's an interesting element, but it means that the ability to plan things out is far fuzzier in a multiplayer version of the game as opposed to the single player game. So for that reason, I want to play it some more and sort of see where I land on it overall. I think it could shoot well up my list or further down and off of it altogether. And I'm just not quite sure which way it's going to go at this point, but I want to play it some more times at 2 and 3 players to see how that handles. So that is my number 80, Lahav. My number 79 is quite a different game from the last one. It is Galaxy Trucker, and I have the older edition. I don't have the newer one. This is the one that just assumes you're going to be playing all 3 rounds rather than just doing a one and done, which is sort of the default way to play the newer edition from what I understand. Its previous ranking was 44th on my list, so it slipped, and its weight is about a 6 out of 10, which is really compounded by the real-time element, and we'll play 2 to 4 players. Galaxy Trucker is chaos. It's chaos with a degree of complexity that means a lot of the people who might be interested in the sort of rush real-time aspect of a game like Dutch Blitz can't be asked to play this one because there's just too many rules that you have to know, and every player has to know them well, which is a bit of more of an ask than if I'm playing a game that is turn-based with other players that's fairly complex, but I can give them information on how things work at any time. It sort of gets a little muddier if I'm having to advise based on cards that they hold that I can't see. But still, I can sort of help people along in other games in a way that I can't in this one, because you got to make your decisions real time. Now, that's only half the game. Half the game is building your ship, and you got to know what all the different things do, roughly speaking, and why you want all of them. And then also, you just need to develop the skill of assembling the ship fast with the pieces that you need into something that is going to be able to withstand the second half of the game, which is typically where the game just tears you apart. At least until you theoretically get good, and I'm not really there yet personally. I don't play it enough to really have this sort of mastery over the second half of the game, so I just sort of take it for granted that my ship is going to fall apart like everyone else's. Although I do tend to do a little bit better than players who are completely new, of course. There is a definite skill ceiling to this game. It's chaotic. It has been criticized for the second half of the game not really giving you control over what it is. But I think you can get around that if you resign yourself to the fact that this is sort of how you see the consequences of your actions in the first half playing out. So it is still driven by you and your choices. It's just, it's a little bit more ornate and drawn out than, say, watching to see how you scored the victory conditions against other players in like a Euro game at the end. You don't have direct control and choices at that point in the game either, but you do see how those choices ended up turning out for you. And I think as a way of doing that in a little bit more of a thematically elaborate way, I think that's a perfectly valid way of doing things in here. The real game is, despite the fact that it takes far less time, is in assembling your ship. And then you just hope that things turn out well. It does give you some things to do. You do get a few choices in the second half, so it isn't just like watching a movie or something at that point. But it is something that is a little bit beyond your control, and I think that's part of the design of like, oh, well, I guess I wasn't that attached to that ship after all, where you really are just like, why did I have to roll anything? Why couldn't I have rolled anything other than a 7, right? Because it can come down to that your whole ship blows up because you just rolled the asteroid hitting the wrong part of your ship. That's Galaxy Trucker. I think it's quite entertaining. I think it's quite fun. There's a ton of expansions that I never really delved into. Again, I like it quite a bit, but there are 78 other games that I would consider higher on my priority list, just judging by where this one sits on my top 100. So I don't think at that range it's going to get played enough for me to justify hunting down those expansions or getting the new edition and or doing any of that stuff. But I do like it quite a bit, and I do recommend it for very specific groups of people. I think I can kind of just sense the vibe of a group, whether or not they'd find this one to be a jam or not. So that is my number 79, Galaxy Trucker. My number 78 is a game that I know is higher for a lot of other people, but I still like it quite a bit. I think it's a great game. It's just not going to quite make my top 50, and that is Everdale. Everdale is a game that ranked 42nd on my previous top 100 list. Its weight is about a 5 out of 10. Some people think this is a gateway game. I would disagree with that. And it plays 1 to 4 players, and I would be pretty comfortable at all 4 of those player counts. Although maybe I would be reluctant to show 3 new players this game, and do a 4-player game with a bunch of new players. I think it might go a little long there, but even so, I could see there being reasons to play 4-player games if people know roughly what they're doing. Everdale is a worker placement slash card tableau building game, and it is a game that has a palpable acceleration in terms of your ability to do things. It's divided into springs, it starts winter, then goes spring, summer, and fall. And each of those seasons gets progressively longer because every season gives you at least 1 new worker, which is not the only thing you can do that turn. You can also play cards, and almost every turn is going to consist of either placing a worker or playing a card. But as you go, you just do progressively more, and things snowball, and you get more resources based on the cards that you play, and then the cards will re-trigger depending on what season it is, and then there will be combinations, and then there will be cards that you can play for free because you've placed another card. If anything, I am only a little put off by the element of having the game cut you off at, I believe it is either 12 or 15 cards. That's the maximum. I would have to look it up. I would prefer to be able to shoot past that and try to go for a more monumental score. But it does make sure that you can't crush people as massively as you could otherwise. It's a solid worker placement game. It's a solid tableau builder. The art is by far the most outstanding element of it, and it does look tremendous. There's a giant tree that sits in the middle of your board if you use it. I choose to use it because I like trees. It's quite a bit of fun. If anything, the reason why it doesn't sit higher on my list would have to be that it doesn't have an element other than the art and maybe this sort of Redwall-ish theme that stands out to me as particularly and incredibly exciting. It's not as deep and massively complex as a game like, I don't know, Great Western Trail, which I already talked about, or something like Brass Birmingham. It doesn't have that level of meatiness to it. It doesn't have the lightness that would make it a good gateway game. There's just far more going on in here than you should hoist on anyone who isn't at least gotten into some games and is willing to take on something more complex and involved than Ticket to Ride. Because a lot of people just want to stop there, and that's fine. I think the theme and the art may sort of trick some people into thinking that it is a better game for new gamers than it actually is. However, I could see it working as a next step game or the step after that, if that were to receive some kind of nomenclature. It's very solid. It's just not distinct enough to be among my inner circle of absolute favorites. But as sort of in that next tier after that of games that I really love quite a bit, just not the first games that I would like pull out to play on any occasion where I think I could get away with it. It's a solid entry here, and it's a game that shows the strength of my list, that if it's sitting at 78, there are a lot of other really good games on this list. So that is my number 78, Everdale. My number 77 is not a game I have here. I'm empty-handed for this entry, and that is Orleon, or Orleans, or some variation of one of those pronunciations. Its previous ranking is 62, so it slipped, but not massively. Its weight is about a 7, and it'll play 2 to 4 players. Not a game I own, but it is a game I quite like. My brother, I believe, has a copy, unless he's gotten rid of it. And it's a bag building game that has a fairly not quite a worker placement element because you're just sort of placing workers on your own board, and it's less about blocking like yourself or other players, and it's more about just the fact that you need a certain type of chip from your bag in order to do certain tasks. I believe some of them will accommodate multiple different types. It's been a while since I've played this. It is just a very solid Meteor Euro game that I don't get to play that often. In part because I don't own it, and in part because I know it's a fairly specific situation or group that would be entertained by this particular game. It is a game I recommend quite easily if you want something that's a little bit more involved. If you like the idea of deck building, but with something other than cards, this is a good direction to go. It does seem to let you go after things with different strategies. There's also a map element and trying to score points by claiming places on the map. It gives you some options, and it lets you decide which actions you want to lean on more heavily based on the types of workers that you acquire over the course of the game. Lots of things to like about it. I feel like it's been long enough that I really need to get this played again just to refresh myself on both how it plays and also just sort of reacquaint myself with my feelings about this game. But from what I remember, I do enjoy this game quite a bit. It is a very solid game, and I would love to have an opportunity to play it again. That is my number 77, Orleon. Okay, so I promised a bunch of lightweight games, and for the previous 4, I've talked about medium to medium heavy games. That ends now. We're going to start talking about a bunch of lighter stuff. So that's going to start with my number 76, 646 Nimmt. This is a game that incidentally has a bunch of different versions. I believe there's a Category 5 one themed about hurricanes. This is not a game you worry about the theme very much at all. It's also a game that is just super easy to explain to just about anyone. It is previously ranked at 72, so it's barely slipped at all. Its weight is a 1. It is very dirt simple. And it will play, I would say, 4 to 8 players comfortably. I believe the box says 3 to 10. I would not play this at 9 or 10 players. I'm not sure I would ever play it at 3. 4, probably 5 to 7. That's more the sweet spot. 8 would likely still be willing to do it. 9 or 10, that's getting to be a little much. Especially 10, because that would mean that every card in the game would be dealt out to players, so there'd be no mystery about whether or not a certain card is in play or not. Essentially, the idea in 6 Nimmt is that you have a set of 4 rows of cards, and you play cards out, and they go next to the card that it is closest to, but still higher than. So if an 80 is out and a 76 is out, and those are the rightmost cards in each row, a 79 would go to the next to the 76, not next to the 80 because it's closer going up. It's the closest that it's higher than, that it goes next to. You just play cards. You put them out in order of turn order, I guess. I suppose it doesn't matter. No, it actually goes out in order of from lowest card to highest card, regardless of where people are around the table. I shouldn't have this much trouble remembering the rules for a game as light as this, but oh well. And basically, as soon as you play the 6th card in a row, you take all the previous cards. That's a problem because you're trying to avoid taking cards because all cards will have at least 1 point, and they may have as many as 7 points on those cards. So you could take a bunch of points, but you're going to be taking at least 5 points. The card that was the 6th one in the row becomes the first one in the new row, and you just keep going. And the first person to take negative 66 points total through multiple rounds is going to end the game, and then whoever took the fewest negative points over the course of the game is the overall winner. It's solid. It's very easy to explain. There's a little bit of, if I play this card now, is the other player going to play the card that's just beneath it and cause me problems because then my card will not, instead of being the 5th card in that row, it'll be the 6th card, and then I have to take all those points. or will they not play now, or should I just wait, or should I do something else? But if I wait, maybe I'm going to get stuck playing this card and the final card in the round anyway. So there is a trickiness to it that is pretty remarkable for a game that is as rules light as this. You know most of what you need to do to play this game from just my description. So again, not very difficult at all. It's just a nice, breezy game to be able to pull out in a bunch of different situations, and the flexible player count is certainly helpful for getting this one played. I would recommend it, and I think this is one of those games where I can recommend this to just about anyone. It doesn't really matter whether you or not you play a bunch of other board games. You're going to be able to get this one. It does not take a rocket scientist to figure out how to play this fairly simple and fairly familiar feeling card game. It doesn't feel out of step with what you would play on a standard deck of cards, for instance. So that is my number 76, 6 Nimmt. Give it a try. Very good game. And it really doesn't matter which version you pick up. There's a bunch. So, 6 Nimmt. So, while it was cute, I thought at least, that 6 Nimmt was ranked at 76. Although, honestly, it would have been better had I ranked it at 66, but then I would have to push 10 games down the list as a result. This one, the number doesn't work out well at all, unfortunately, because my number 75 is number 9. So, what can I say? Its previous ranking wasn't a cute number either. It was 73 on my last list. Its weight is about a 1 out of 10, and it'll play 1 to 4 players. And, yeah, no problems in any of those player counts. Number 9 is very direct and very easy to get your head around. You place tiles, you draw from a deck that has 2 of each number, and each number has a tile that is a specific shape based on the number. So 9 will look a certain way, and a 1 will look a certain way, and so on. You have to place them in such a way that at least one side is directly touching another side, and not like corner to corner. And then you can also place on top, as long as you place in such a way that that the one on top covers at least 2 different tiles, and also doesn't overhang any gaps. And basically, you're trying to build up as much as possible. The higher you build up, the more your multiplicational bonus will be for building up higher. On the table, anything that's touching the table, or whatever surface you're playing on, that will get you 0 points. But anything on the first level up will be 1 point for the number. So a 7 will be worth 7 points on that level. On the next level, on top of that one, will be the ×2 layer, which will be 2 points per number. So that'll be 2 times that same 7 tile. It'll be 14 points there, and so on. So the higher you build up, the more points you get. And that's basically it. You've got 20 tiles, 2 of each of the 10 numbers, including 0, which is also worth 0 points, no matter what level you put it on. So if you learn that from your multiplication tables, congratulations. That's a useful fact to know here. It's just very easy. The pieces seem to be intentionally shaped to be not easy to make work in clean and easy to work around spaces. Some of the tiles are incredibly difficult to make overlap and not cause gaps. Like the 7 is very difficult. The 3 is not very easy to work around, and so on. So that's interesting to me, and it also doesn't let you flip to the flip side. There's one side that's colored, and the other side is just black. You can never play it with the black side up. So there's only one orientation of the tile that you can use to build, and that further restricts it and just makes it more difficult. This is a game that I've probably played more times solo than almost all the other games in my collection, and I think it's just because it is incredibly easy to just knock out a game of this in 10 minutes. Especially when you're playing solo, when you don't have to worry about waiting for the... Whoa! Sorry, my cat just tried to jump up on my lap and failed spectacularly. Anyways, so it's very easy to knock out a game of this in 10 minutes. It takes very little setup. So unlike a game of like On Mars, which again, I mentioned, I have set up here. I'm not playing, but I have it set up. There isn't a massive amount of time dedicated to just getting it going, and then there aren't a ton of rules in the overhead to worry about. it's it's a solid game, and I would recommend it to most people. I don't think, unless you dislike Tetris, there's no reason not to give it a shot. So that is my number 75. Number 9. My number 74 is new to the list. It is Furnace, which has come out fairly recently. Its weight is about a 3 out of 10, I would figure, and it plays 2 to 4 players. Furnace is an Industrial Revolution themed game. That's nice, but it's not all that important, other than the fact that it manages to make the factories on here look fairly nice for being such staid and block-like buildings. It's a little economic engine building game with some basic bidding that plays very quickly. It's in 4 rounds and it's done. Each of those 4 rounds is 4 turns. And then the second half is just running your engine. Running your engine is just do a card, do the things described on it, turn it to the side to indicate that you've already used it. That's basically it. There's not a ton of rules overhead, and I think this might be a good gateway game for people who are not dealing with a lot of who you feel you could push a little bit into introducing them into things that are going to come up in other games. Like, I could see this being a good game if you eventually want to introduce someone to Race for the Galaxy, for instance. It's just a solid little engine builder, and I think the fact that, unlike a lot of other engine buildings, you can easily play it within 30 minutes, means that it has a place in my collection that is not going to be lost anytime soon. Very good. Liked. I could see this, if I get this played with my family a lot, climbing my rankings, but I could also just see it hanging around the 70s, 80s, or 90s as well for a few years. So that is my number 74. Very good game, Furnace. My number 73 is No Thanks, a little card game that I've had for quite some time. And it is previously ranked at 43. Its weight is 1 and plays 3 to 5 players, although this edition does claim you can play it up to 7 players. Just play it at 3 to 5 players. There's no reason not to. No Thanks is a little push your luck game in which you make a simple binary decision every turn. You can either take the card, but cards have numbers on them representing a certain amount of points. So the card with 23 on it represents 23 points. Points are bad. You want as few points as possible. Or you can do something else that you don't really want to do, which is take one of your negative point chips, of which you start with 11 and will vary through the game, and put it on the card. So what happens is, I pass on the 23, the person on my left passes on the 23, the person on my right passes on 23. Now I have the same decision again, but there are 3 chips on the card that weren't there before, and I get those if I take the card. So do I take it now and get those 3 chips, or do I push it off around and see if I can get another 3 going around the table? And so that's basically what you're doing. The only other thing you have to keep track of is if you have a run of cards. So if you have the 22, 23, 24, and 25 all in a row, only the 22 counts as points against you, which means you could easily take a 21 or a 26 and add it to either end of that run, and you take no additional points. In fact, if you take the 21, you're actually getting 1 fewer point than you did before. But maybe you put a chip on that 21 anyway, even though everyone knows you want it, because you're going to bleed some other people out of chips. But you don't know how many chips other people have. It's interesting. It could be considered a type of auction game. I'm not sure I would consider it that. But it is a really interesting little dilemma that you present people with. And the choice is so basic and so easy that you can play this game with almost anyone. In fact, I think if you couldn't get this played with someone, you would have to seriously question whether or not there's anything you would be able to play with him. There are probably technically simpler games out there, but whether or not they would be even remotely interesting to play. Is it remotely interesting to play Candyland, for instance? I doubt it. But as far as games that are simple that I enjoy, this has been often the game that I call the simplest game I like. if I looked through the rest of my top 100, would I find something else that's simpler than this? I don't think so. Like, even... I think this has fewer rules than even the few party games that I have on my list. So, no, I think this is going to be the king of that category until something that is equally fun comes along that is somehow simpler than the 5 rules that are involved in this one. So that is No Thanks. Stellar game. Recommend it easily. Could see this bouncing anywhere from my top... with it getting into my top 40, scraping the bottom of that, to jumping around to the 80s or 90s. But what I certainly don't see is this going off my list anytime soon. Terrific game. Play it. Thank me later. No thanks. My number 72 is Azul, which previously was ranked at 64, so slipped, but not that much. Weight is about a 2 out of 10, and it will play 2 to 4 players. Azul is not my favorite game that has the word Azul in it. There are 3 others, 2 of which I've played, 1 other of which I own. That other one that I own might be a little higher on this list. But this one is still really good, and I think this is always going to be the one that will outlast the other games in the series. As much as I prefer one other game that we'll talk about later in this series, this is the one that I could see being played in like 50, 60, 70 years. This is a game I could see myself playing with my grandchildren easily. It's just very simple, accessible. It's abstract but beautiful. It is a drafting game that just has a very clever way of how the drafting works and the push and pull of when you want to take from the center versus when you want to take from one of the offering plates. There's always a little bit of difficulty in deciding, like, which thing do you take to cut someone else off, and which is part of the reason why I would say this is a game that works best at 2, because you can more easily track what a single other player is doing and what you need to take away from them more easily than you can do that in a 4-player game. It's hard for me to come up with words to describe this other than the fact that this just feels like a classic, and it feels like a game that, now that it's here, we're just not going to hear anyone... we're going to hear about this from people for decades to come. I think it's a really solid game. I do like it quite a bit. But there's a better Azul experience, which I'll be talking about significantly later. So yes, give this one a try if you haven't already. Give it a try with essentially almost anyone who you think could handle a handful of rules. This may not be quite as dirt simple as No Thanks, but it's not that far off either. This is going to just go over well with almost anyone. So that is my number 72, Azul. My number 71 is Arcadia Quest. Arcadia Quest is something of an atypical game in my collection and atypical of my usual taste in games. It previously was ranked at a 53. Its weight is about a 6 and plays 2 to 4 players. Okay, so Arcadia Quest is kind of a lighter dungeon crawl-ish kind of game, and there is somewhat of a campaign, although the story isn't incredibly involved. There's miniatures, which is, again, one of the few games that I have that is that has miniatures, to be honest. It's just a simple-ish game about fighting things and fighting each other and rolling some dice and getting positive results on those dice and having this sort of chibi art style, which is charming, and there are bad guys, and there's cool items, and there's the opportunity to go shopping after games. There's just a lot of things that I like about this game that I would categorize as kind of shallow but charming anyway. It's not even that it's brainless. It's not. There is some thought that has to be put into how you go about playing your characters effectively and how to use your special powers and what sort of things you should prioritize and whether or not you actually have the ability to successfully take on a fight with a boss. There are those elements, and those provide some needed depth to the game, but it's also not a game that is designed to just be endlessly replayable and so deep that you could play it for years and years and still be discovering new layers to how to play it well. As much as I like games like that, I like having the option of going away from that sometimes, and this is certainly a good way to go away from that. Do I want to play it all the time? No, but I don't want to play even my favorite heavy Euro games all the time either, so that's not really a condemnation of this. If anything, this proves that I need to look into sort of simpler dungeon crawlers and even more complex ones a little bit more seriously, because if I like this one well enough to get it sliding into my top 100 at around 71, there have to be other ones out there that I like just as much or more, you would think anyway. I just haven't explored those types of games as much as I've explored the sort of heavier strategy type Euro games. So yes, I would recommend this one, and I would recommend this to people who would be put off by maybe the heavy Euro-centric nature of my top 100. If you're looking for a recommendation for something that is not that sort of game, and not just a light game or a filler, as I've been talking about for the last several entries, yeah, this might be a good choice. You might have a fairly good time just chucking some dice and going after each other in this one. It's also competitive, whereas a lot of other games of this type are cooperative in nature or one versus many, with one player sort of being the Dungeon Master-esque role and everyone else fighting them. This is not. This is everyone for themselves and going after each other directly, although you do have a choice of how much you want to try to go after other players versus how much you decide to just go after the sort of environmental monsters and challenges that are there, because you can get a point towards victory essentially by going after other players, but you can also theoretically win the game without ever attacking another human player in the game. I think, if I'm recalling that correctly anyway. So that is my number 71 Arcadia Quest. So that was my number 71 through 80 of my top 100. I said a lot of light games, but there's also a lot of medium weight games on the list. Only one or two of which I would consider heavy. And it also seemed like all the light games were bunched together in the same set of rankings. This is not representative of the list as a whole, but it does show that I don't just play one sort of game. I do tend to play different things, and a lot of it depends on the exact group that I have to play games with. What I think is going to be successful, what I think is going to go over well, what the level of complexity that they're willing to stomach is, how much time we think we have. These are all considerations that go into what exactly gets brought out. And usually I like to have a variety of options that can hit different possible notes in a game bag if I'm going over to someone else's place in order to play that. But that's an aside. For now, I just want to thank you for watching this, and hopefully you can check out the other videos about this top 100 list and see all the other stuff that I beg other people to play with me. Anyways, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.